Throughout the history of Freemasonry, leadership has been a major factor. And in the history of Kansas Freemasonry, that is also the case. Actually, throughout the history of our jurisdiction, the way that we've trained leadership has gone through several different changes. And we're going to talk about that tonight. We have a few amazing guests that are going to help us work through that history and get you in touch with how leadership training has been done right here in the grand jurisdiction of Kansas. So stick with us. We have an amazing episode lined up for you right after this on Historical Light.
Welcome back to the Historical Light Masonic Podcast, dedicated to illuminate our past and bring our Masonic history to light since 2016. And now, enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome back to Historical Light, an independent Masonic show focused on the historical events and aspects within Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Alex Powers, and stoked to have with us two past Grand Masters of Kansas this evening, Most Worshipful Rick Reichert, Most Worshipful Tracy Bloom, who's also the acting Grand Secretary. Brothers, I want to turn it over to you and get a more proper introduction of you, just kind of your background in Freemasonry and who you are. Most Worshipful Reichert, if we could start with you.
Oh, good evening, Alex, and Most Worshipful Brother Tracy. Good to be here. Yeah, I started my Masonic journey back in 1988, 87, getting into Masonry up in Pennsylvania. I was actually in the military at the time, stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And from one Commonwealth to another, I wanted to join the lodge that my father was in. So that's what I did. So I've been a member of Collegeville Lodge, number 310, ever since. And of course, with the military, I got to travel the world. And after Uncle Sam decided to drop me off at Fort Leavenworth for the third time, I just decided to stay here. And of course, I joined Hancock Lodge number 311 on Fort Leavenworth. And since I was permanent party by then, I could go through the chairs there. I was master in 2003. Hard to believe 10 years later, I was in the Grand East. And but served in a lot of positions between those 2 points. So right now I'm just serving on the Kansas Masonic Foundation Board of Trustees. We get to meet tomorrow. And of course, always try to attend as many Grand Lodge events and go to as many lodges as I can. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Most Worshipful Bloom, how about yourself?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Clay Center, Kansas, which is north central Kansas. Then I moved to Salina years later, and through an acquaintance at work, took a tour of the building there and just became fascinated with it. Asked the magical question, and he happily presented me with a petition. The odd thing about that was that so these guys did a little research on me, right? And they reached out to a relative of mine. And as I went up to the lodge to take my third degree, my uncle was there. And I said, "What are you doing here?" So I come to get your third degree. And I said, "Are you a Mason?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I've been a Mason for a long time." And, quite frankly, probably me growing up as a teenager in a small town USA, I probably wouldn't have asked me to join either. So anyway, that's, in that process that I found out I had several uncles that were Masons. I had the privilege of raising my father. He came in after me, and that was quite an experience, and one that I cherish and will never forget. So, yep. So that's it. So I actually joined the lodge in 1994, and have been absolutely active in it, either the lodge or Grand Lodge, ever since then. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. we like to start these off with a little bit of an icebreaker just to get to know you guys on a little deeper level before we dive into the topic at hand for this evening. So within what you said there, we usually ask if you've got some family history in Masonry, and we heard that trend. So I'm curious with you, with some of that family history, even some that you didn't know about, was any of that what really turned you on or made you aware of Freemasonry, or what was it that made you want to join yourself?
Who are we starting with?
Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you, I knew that my dad and my grandfather were both Masons, and my dad tried to get me into DMLA for many years, but I didn't know what he did. I didn't know when he went for meetings. I didn't know what other organization. I found out he was a Shriner later on, and Scottish Rite and all that good stuff. He never mentioned anything about it, and so I figured if he wasn't excited about it, why should I be? So off I went to college and then into the military. And then when I finally ended up back in the U.S. and stationed, like I said, at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, right down the street from where George Washington had his place at Mount Vernon, I traveled home one weekend, and my parents had moved. They moved to a country estate out past Norristown, Pennsylvania, near Valley Forge, and my dad had associated with his neighbor who ended up being a member of a country lodge out there called in Collegeville. And when I got home on leave and I'm talking with him, and next thing you know, he wouldn't stop talking about it. This is a guy that never talked about Masonry my entire time growing up. And now it was, it's everything about how great these guys are. And it was like going home, and because he knew a lot of these guys from work acquaintances that he didn't know that they were Masons. And oh my gosh, he just had it was so exciting. I said, well, if that's enough to excite my dad, who's not really excitable and stuff like that, then I want part of that. So I petitioned that lodge, and they had to go through a special dispensation because I was stationed in Virginia at the time. But they went through all that, and I did all my degree work up there, and just a little bit of embellishment, sorry. My dad was junior warden at the time, and their tradition was that the junior warden would preside over the first degree, the senior warden the second, the master of the third degree. And my dad had just learned the first degree when he gave me the first degree as the master of the lodge. A month later, I proved proficiency and came up to get my second degree. He was in the East. And when I came to get my third degree, there he was in the East again. We're talking about a guy that learned the master's part on all 3 degrees within 3 months and did it flawlessly. I was amazed.
That's really cool. I mean, obviously, he had some motivation to get there, but that's a lot of work nonetheless. That's really, really cool. Most Worshipful Bloom, how about yourself?
Yeah, so completely different path for me. I didn't know anything about Masonry until I asked about it. This friend of mine that I worked with, and he took me over there, was intrigued by it. I didn't learn that my family was involved in it as heavily as they were until the night I took my third degree. I found out that I had relatives that belonged to the lodge. Not even belonged to the lodge, they were officers of the lodge, right? And so it was kind of astonishing to me, and it was a revelation also, because, and I think Rick would probably agree with me, that that greatest generation, those guys, they were tight-lipped about it. They did not talk about it whatsoever, which is, I think unfortunate, right? I mean, but anyway, that was their modus operandi, and we see that all the time. We hear that from a lot of people that, oh, my grandfather, he never talked about it. So it is an interesting dynamic that that Masonry had that kind of influence on them, that they knew that they needed members, but they weren't going to solicit anybody for membership. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of the story, and yeah, so I had, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 of my uncles were past masters of the lodge. One of them was the secretary of the lodge. I had no clue. The other thing, several years later, Most Worshipful Bob Tomlinson had asked me to be assistant Grand Tyler for him, and I said I'd do it. He called me up one night and he says, "Hey, could you present emblems at Clay Center Lodge for me because I can't make it?" I said, "Sure, I'll do that." So when I went there to do that, and I was just a young, aspiring Grand Lodge officer that didn't know what the heck he was doing. The thing that impressed me about that was when I went in there to do that, the longtime mayor of Clay Center was a member. My school teachers were members. My scoutmaster was a member. So all these influential people that were in the community, right? They were all members, and I was kind of I was in awe when I went in there, because I had no idea. So yeah, it's funny the path that we take on our Masonic journey. So
that's a really awesome story. So both of you guys have led impressive Masonic careers. You've gone through the officer roles of your lodge, the officer roles of Grand Lodge. The crazy part about you is neither of you have gotten your fix yet. You've still taken on big official roles with Reichert and the KMF. Bloom, you're still in the Grand Lodge as Grand Secretary. With all the craziness, the good, the bad, everything you guys have dealt with all the years, what is it that keeps you around in Masonry?
Well, I can tell you, it's guys like Tracy, and it's amazing. Like just in this last leadership conference that we had, the Guild, it's the same group of guys. I've seen them for years and years, and it's just great company. I mean, we just it is a small little family. It's all on its own. Those are the things that keep me coming back. I enjoy Masonry, and if I'm not engaged in something Masonic, I start getting really ooky, and I start looking at my watch and wondering what day it is, because I know there's got to be a lodge meeting somewhere. There's got to be a meeting going on. So it draws me back. I want to learn. I like these formats for Kansas Lodge of Research and Masonic. This one, the light, and all these things that where brothers gather together and talk about the craft is what draws me. I love it.
Fantastic. Bloom, what keeps you around?
Yeah, I echo those sentiments from Rick exactly. I mean, it's not to be too corny, right? It's all about the Masonic experience, right? And the thing is, you get to choose what that Masonic experience is. Yeah, you can choose to either have a good one or a bad one. It's your choice. And it's like Rick said, we get in our little groups, when we go to lodge, we get probably in a small little group, and we feed off of each other and we learn. It's the same way with the Grand Lodge officers. When we're around each other, we're feeding off each other, learning all the time. And then even bigger than that, when we go to like other jurisdictions, it's like I'm in Iowa right now, right, attending their annual meeting. It's just it's the same group of folks that I'm around, right? But it's just every one of them is a different Masonic experience. Every one of those is a learning Masonic experience. I always take something away from whether I'm at the lodge or I'm at the Grand Lodge or the Grand Lodge of Iowa or the Conference of Grand Masters. My gosh, Rick knows this well too, that you go to those things, you learn so much from there that we have to, and our duty, right, to come back and share that with the Grand Lodge of Kansas. And so that's, some of the things that have developed over the last 10, 15, 20 years have been because of those Masonic experiences that we've attended. So.
Fantastic. Well, I am really stoked to hear a little bit more about your guys' journey as we kind of progress through talking about leadership and how that's been an aspect throughout the years. But before we get into the meat and potatoes this evening, I do got to give a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters who keep us expanding and bringing you more great content all the time. So if you like what we do here, you can jump over to the website, historicalite.com/support, and you can support us through Patreon. We have some awesome levels there where you can get some great perks to go along with that, including the exclusive Patreon Historicalite lapel pin. And even if you want to go to the ambassador level, we got a breast jewel. It's pretty awesome. So appreciate all you guys do. We've been around since 2016, focused on Masonic history, and we want to keep doing that. So if you like what you see here, jump over to the website and help us keep growing. Brothers, I am stoked to jump into this. I want to say hello real quick to everyone watching. We've got a few on the YouTube, and we've got a bunch over on Facebook. I'm seeing Brother Justin Staley saying hello. Brother Maddox is back. Thank you so much. Brother Young here is saying, hello, brothers. Much love. Blessings. Keep up the great work. Leadership is huge. Keep leading. 100%. There's a lot of that to do. And tonight we're going to talk about how that has kind of progressed within Kansas, because we just, as Most Worshipful Reichert hinted at, we just had an event here called the Guild Meeting. And it was focused on leadership, but it's actually kind of morphed out of other developments in Kansas. So I guess where I want to start is when you guys were coming up into Masonry, just new Masons, what was the leadership aspect back then? How was it? And what kind of training, if any, was there going on? Loaded question.
Well, no, since Tracy went through the Grand East before I did, I'm going to yield to him to go first.
Gee, thanks, Rick. Yeah, so it was very interesting dynamic. Rick and Rick was in on this too, right? So when I was coming up through the line, I was, as I was progressing, I was starting to get a little bit worried about the time commitment. And one evening we had a meeting, and Roy Sullivan was the deputy grand master. Kent Needham was the grand senior warden, and I was grand junior warden. And Roy held the three of us back, and he says, "Hey, look, guys," he says, I'm a little bit worried about the time commitment," because he had a full-time job. Kent was managing a bank or two, and I had a full-time job, and so Roy actually started what's called the Council on Planning, which is planning for your year, and but the thought process behind that was, back then a Grand Master would develop a program for his year and promote that throughout the year. But when he was done, it was like it was done. And we, the three of us, decided, and I think it might have been Don Newman because he was between Rick and I. So we decided that we didn't want to develop any more new programs. We wanted to take the programs that were working and expound on them, right? Make them better. And also to limit the time commitment that we had, because our time was limited, right? So we kind of entered into that phase, which was probably the whole start of even the change to the Leadership Academy or actually Warden School back then it was called. So that was kind of the start of that. And once we kind of got our feet underneath us, then we looked at that Warden School, Wardens and Secretary School, and decided, or we thought we could improve on it. And I think we did. I don't know that some will probably argue that, right? But then when we decided to kick that off, we decided to change the name from the Warden School to the Leadership Academy. And I think the first year we did that, I think was Don was in charge of it, so he would have been the Deputy Grand Master. And we actually held it at the State Capitol building in the House Chamber, I think it was. We did that 2 years in a row.
Wow.
So that was a big transition for us right there.
So from an attendance aspect, how did the Warden School differ from what we knew of the Leadership Academy in format?
Yeah, so the Warden School was really more focused on okay, this is how you run a meeting. This is how you prepare a budget. This is how you put things on a calendar. Pretty basic things that I guess in that change, we thought that the brothers should already have that well in hand, right? We're not talking rocket science there, right? We're just talking managing a meeting. And so, but we thought we could expand on that, enhance that teaching with some leadership skills in the presentations that were prepared.
Fantastic. Most worshipful Reichert, what were some of your experiences with Leadership Academy and kind of what you thought about the program?
Don't forget to send the book.
Oh, I'll show my historical record here. Yeah, when I came through, when I was going through the chairs at Hancock Lodge, which was a great experience, great lodge, still is. They gave me the opportunity to go to warden school, even when I was a junior warden, and that was in the year 2000. And I still have the book today. It was a nice binder, and interestingly enough, it was a 2-day program, and it was chock full of all kinds of stuff. It was like, as Worshipful Tracy said, they got back to the basics, B2B, which is kind of interesting since that's what the guild was aiming at. But what was great was even for those who had leadership skills already, what it really did was it focused you into all the mechanics that you had to think about when operating a lodge as a master. Because you think about leadership of a lodge, it's not like Lions or Kiwanis or something where you basically preside over the meetings, you hand out certificates or do whatever your mission is. When you're master of the lodge, that is a holistic thing. You've got a budget, you've got people, you may have people on a payroll. So now you got employees, you got a building that you got to take care of. You have proficiency, you have, you got to train your officers the way, and the calendar, all these aspects of lodge leadership that aren't part of a day-to-day management or leadership role. So it doesn't matter what your background is. Senior Warden School is what it was actually called. It was called Grand Lodge of Kansas Senior Wardens Class of 2000. And for me, it was great because it showed me all the other pieces of the puzzle that I really didn't have a good appreciation for. And you just can't walk in off the street and be master of a lodge, even with great leadership skills. So the other thing that was very interesting was that this school ran for 2 solid days. It was a 2-day commitment to go to warden school. And when I went through in 2000, it was full, and it was run by guys that you may know: Mark Nelson, Bob Tomlinson, Jeff Souder. Who else was in there? Glenn Core, and Alan Hurlbert. I mean, just a lot of great names. These were past grandmasters that came in to help teach the course of getting back to the basics. But the other interesting thing is that the guest speakers during the day and for the dinner in the evening were names that you'd also recognize, like Robert Davis, and Tresner, Jim Tresner. And of course, they're not only are they great authors, but they were dynamic speakers. So man, what a capstone thing that was to have those guys. And so that was in 2000. You fast forward a little bit, getting close to 10 years later. And like Tracy was saying, we were having these conversations even when I came in as Roy Sullivan's grand senior deacon appointment. And then Halloran came along and he kind of spiced things up a little bit. So during the conversations that we had we had looked around in the last couple of warden schools, and they were very poorly attended, where they were chock full of people before. For some reason, the message wasn't getting out about how valuable this coursework was. And I mean, it's a 2-day commitment. You had to travel. There's a lot, and there was some cost to it for overnight accommodations and food and everything. So we couldn't figure out what the story was. Why weren't people, what's the take rate? So one of the things we decided was that calling it a senior warden school had two problems. One, it limited it to a target audience of senior wardens getting ready for their year. The other problem is that if you're senior warden, and this is halfway through the senior warden's year, you're already too late to be planning for things in the East. You need to be doing that a whole lot earlier. Why? Because it gives you a chance, if you know what's coming, you can observe and start learning those ropes long before you get to the East. So as you're working your way through the lodge, you've got your jobs in the lodge, but you're also keeping the eye on the next job up. So instead of calling it warden school or all the officer school, the idea was to call it leadership academy. And I'm not sure who termed that phrase. I know it wasn't me, but I'm grateful for it because it really laid out what it is we were trying to do. And the other big splash to get things going was, as Brother Tracy was saying, we were going to hold it right across the street from the Grand Lodge building at the Capitol. So, I mean, that was an amazing place to have it because the breakout sessions were either in the Senate or the House. I think there was some stuff going on in the judges' chambers, and then the next thing you know, we get together for lunch in the middle of all this, and oh, what a fantastic place it was! And as the deputy grand master at the time, the first one was in 2012. It was October the 6th of 2012, and I remember it specifically because I missed it. This was the greatest thing that ever happened. And my mother passed away just a couple weeks before that, and I had to miss it. So traditionally, the Deputy Grand Master runs the Leadership Academy because they're going to be he's training at least if they're senior wardens, they would be masters while he's a Grand Master. So it was kind of anticlimactic for me, but I was glad the second year we held it in the Capitol building again, because then I got to get the feel for it all. And it was fabulous. We could sit there at one of the representatives' desks and bang your shoe on the table and say, I disagree. No, it was it's just a grand place to have it. And you think, well, this is ours. This is Kansas. This is all part of Kansas. We had a problem though. It was the best problem to have. We couldn't fit in there on year 3. It was becoming such a popular thing that we could not fit in the Capitol in year 3.
Wow.
Yeah, the numbers were just getting astounding. So we went, I believe we went to the Plaza Hotel in Topeka. Again, I mentioned my Calvin, he swung some sort of unbelievable deal. I'm not going to ask the details. It was one of those things where we got a really good deal there. And we started holding it there. Of course, they did us up very nicely there. It was a great forum. I'm not crazy about hotels as a forum, but this was kind of nice. It's I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of off in its own location in the back, and you could have the banquets down in the hotel area with the waterfall and the bar and all that. But it turned out we had I think at one point at the high water mark, we had over 400 people for Leadership Academy.
Wow.
But we were also bringing in great names too. I mean, the keynote speakers were people like Chris Hodap. Him, he wrote the Dummies. He wrote the Dummies Guide because the Idiots Guide was written by another guy that we had in there was Brent Morris. And we had actually launched one of his books at Leadership Academy, which was a pretty sweet deal. It was a Kansas version of the Idiots Guide to Freemasonry. Was and the whole course. Cliff Porter, of course, we've had other guests there too, and then those were a big draw, particularly if we could keep them for dinner and let them speak over dinner. That was pretty nice. But that was the whole idea. Was we were trying to get into the heads of and get attendees to come who were much earlier in the line in the lodge and have them come successive years, so that the first year, if they didn't get what they needed, they get it at a breakout at the next session and so forth. And over the years, we kind of got away from the basic stuff. I'm not sure why we did that. I guess we were afraid that we were giving them the same stuff over and over again, which, as it turns out, I think we really needed to get back to the basics, because just like the old warden school, all those topics are important for a new person that they're afraid to ask. And once they've no matter where their experience level is, they need all these topics. At least they need to hear about them. As mundane as they are, they still need to get them. So I'm I'm glad to see that at least in name we're calling it back to the basics. But that's my recollection of the history.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was sitting there kind of thinking back, and um, Cliff Porter, I think, was the first one I attended, and I remember that session very well. That was he was a great speaker. 400 in one session for Leadership Academy. That's really impressive. Really impressive. So, Most Wishful Bloom, thinking back at the switch from the Warden School into the Leadership Academy and seeing that grow, as Most Wishful Reichert, talked about, we kind of hit that pinnacle point and then started to see a little bit of shift. Where do you think that has gone to bring us to the point that we needed to get back to the basics as we did this year?
Well, I guess I'm not 100% sure. I guess we try to put on a quality program every year, and have good Masonic speakers about leadership, and but that over the years has just kind of waned a little bit. I'm not sure why, and that's why we thought we'd try the back to the basics, right? Go back and review the history of Kansas Masonry, the Constitution and bylaws, sideline etiquette, and all the topics that we talked about were just back to the basic kind of stuff, right? Because I think every now and then you have to do that, right? You have to remind yourself of the basics of what you're doing, and that's a life thing, right? That's not just a Masonic thing. I've done it many times myself. Want to see myself straying off on another path I shouldn't be on. I kind of rein myself back in and go back to the basics or the core values that one should have, or the character of a lodge, let's say, should have those core values. And so I think that was kind of the premise of where we were going with this particular this session that we had last was a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't remember what it was now. I can also say, we did something a little bit different after this. We also sent out a survey. If you attended, you got an email with a link to the survey. It was a completely blind survey, so we didn't ask any phone numbers, we didn't ask any member numbers, we didn't ask for any names. We just wanted some pure good feedback, and so I think we got it. We've looked at some of the comments. I think everybody was fairly honest. And I think we got some. I'm not going to say brutally honest, but certainly very candid feedback on what we could do to improve. So, we're going to take that data, we're going to look at it, and build something out for next year that hopefully is a little bit better. So, not that this time is bad, because we're always looking to improve.
For sure. It makes me question, well, I guess kind of two aspects. It, first of all, makes me think back, because obviously what we're doing here is trying to get leadership within our lodges. And thinking back when I was going through the line in my lodge, I was so tunnel visioned. And maybe some of this falls on mentorship to a degree. A lot of it falls on me for just not seeing the big picture. But I was extremely tunnel visioned in each position. And I know traditionally, the whole thing is you should be proficient and know that position before you're ever elected to it. In my experience, it was, here's the position, then you're cramming to get there. And that was good until the day I sat in not the Grandies, but the east of my lodge, and everyone's looking at me like, you got it. And I'm like, God, what do I do? And, at that point I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do up here. And my feeling of I am not prepared to be in leadership. And it was kind of this very frightening aspect for me that progressively got better through the year. And then about November, I felt I've got this. And then of course you're out of there. So, which is an amazing aspect of, trying to get this leadership ingrained and back to the lodges. So it makes me think with having that many people, and obviously then the fluctuations, do you guys, in your opinion, see this as going great for the individuals, but also was it getting back to the lodges in the way that we had hoped to begin with?
I guess the jury's still out on that. We don't know if it's getting back to the lodges like it should be. We hope that it does. I can tell you from some of the feedback that the basic stuff was very much appreciated, and we're obviously we're going to use that information, expand on it for the next Leadership Academy or Guild 2 or whatever it's going to be called.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I think that's a good point to kind of talk about what was different about this year, because it wasn't called the Leadership Academy. It actually took on that new name of the Guild Meeting. And as we've kind of addressed where that came from and the purpose of getting back to the basics, where did this name, the Guild, come from as a transition from Leadership Academy that we've always known?
Yeah, so every year the Deputy Grand Masters, excuse me, every year the Deputy Grand Master's in charge of the Warden School, Leadership Academy, the Guild, whatever it is, and so he kind of drives that train. And Doug Wilkinson wanted to. He felt the need, I guess, to bring everybody back to the basics, and he did a little research on names and stuff like that, and he came up with what he wanted to call it, the Guild. So we build everything around that. So
that's fantastic. So I didn't get a whole lot of, well, again, it was probably me, tunnel vision. I didn't get a whole lot of the behind the scenes of the structure. I was asked to do the history and I was like, okay, perfect. Start the day off that way. And I'd heard a couple of the other topics and I didn't really think too much until about halfway through the day. It really hit me of, holy crap, each one of these are really flowing into one of another, like perfectly. And I'd imagine that was probably the plan, but it was going a little more perfect than I thought it should have. Almost like the topics were really complementing one another throughout the day.
Yeah, that was by design from Doug. He designed it that way, and he picked the topics, right? And it was, each one built on the next one, and that's exactly what he wanted to do. And I do see a comment in the chat about the name change was a little confusing. And okay, I get that. We put that out there that that there was going to be called something different this year, but it's still the Warden School, Leadership Academy, the Guild, whatever you want to call it, happens mid-September every year. So I guess there should be probably some basic expectations there that that's unless we just move that completely different place in the calendar year. So, but I don't see that happening. So yeah. And, will that name change back next year? I don't know. That, the next person in charge of that will be Derek Hockett. And I know he's gotten some feedback from some folks about it. And so he's looking at that. So.
Fantastic. And thank you for the comment from our good friends over there at the Old Fashioned Masonic podcast. They also threw another one up here saying that we did like it when it was called the Warden School. We'll have to see if that comes back. Just might.
How old is Old Fashioned Masonic podcast?
We'll see if they throw up another comment there. How old is that Old Fashioned Masonic podcast? We'll see.
The reason I mention is because, we changed it, of course, in 2012. So you must have gone through the Warden School prior to 2012. I have a suggestion for those that come behind Doug Wilkinson, and that is we have some amazing venues in Kansas, some of which have our plaque right on the side of the building. Manhattan, I can think of that one. There's some other places like in not only the school, but downtown, that science center. And then, I can just imagine there's a lot of places that we could be doing this that would be pretty spectacular to hold a meeting in, depending on the time of the year. So that would be another draw, I would think, is not only having a great school or a forum for leadership, but also to do it in a place that is just something you can talk about it if you missed it. If when you go back to lodge and talk about it, not only did you miss a great school, but you also missed a great place. They treated us like gold there. So
For sure.
just another recommendation.
Yeah, Rick, that's a great comment too, because we kind of get focused on where we're going to have something, and we base that around how many is going to be there. Can the venue feed everybody? Is hotel accommodations close and reasonable? And so we try to take all that into account when we start figuring up the logistics of meetings like this. And you're right, there's some great places. Discovery Center in Manhattan, that'd be a super place to have a leadership academy or the guild or whatever, or warden school, whatever it is. That's a pretty cool place. But when there's many others too, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't go back to the state capitol building either. I mean, I'll tell you, I can give you a little Masonic secret here. How much that cost us to have that meeting at the state capitol building was, I think it was $150. We had to pay for a security guard all day. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah, the commander at arms or whatever it was. We had to pay him.
Sergeant at arms.
Sergeant at arms, yeah.
Yeah. When I called over to find out how much that was, I said, that's it, $150. Well, yeah, and you don't even pay it to the state. You pay it to the guard. Oh, okay.
That's pretty cool. That was before I came into everything, but I've seen the pictures, and that was always really impressive to me. It was just pretty neat, seeing our guys sitting at the official desks and handling our business in that room, which, I've had the pleasure to go over there and visit as a tourist and see those chambers. And it's just an amazing establishment. And then you think about all the history there as well, which is really, really neat. And then, you throw in a little bit of the Masonic history, that it was actually a brother that owned and donated that land for the Capitol to be built there, as well as where the Topeka Grand Lodge was. He owned that as well at one point. So really, really neat to think back that far. So we've worked through quite a bit of talking kind of pre-existing leadership strategies, needing something official, going into the warden school, that kind of morphing into what we knew as the Leadership Academy for years. And then this year, taking a little bit of a different approach, taking it back to the core, back to the basics with the guild meeting. I know it's up to the Deputy Grand Master, and those plans aren't official yet, but in your opinions, how do you see the future going for leadership training in Kansas? Where do you think it needs to go, and where do you envision it going?
So I'll chime in. We do pay attention to the surveys. So all the surveys will be taken into account. As a matter of fact, we're going to start that process this weekend, and we'll see where it goes from there. There was some question, with this the most recent guild meeting. We changed the name and we changed the location. That's always scary for somebody that's planning for that, right? Because you never know. Does that mean we're going to need more motel rooms? Does that mean we're going to need less motel rooms? Does that mean, we're working with a different caterer and different rules with the venue? Those are all kind of scary things when you're planning for it, because one little mess up, and things can go really bad, and we don't want somebody to have a bad experience with these things, right? We want it to be a positive experience all the way around. And I hope that's what we produced. That's what we aim for. And if there's somebody that doesn't have a good time or somebody that has a bad experience, and we'd like to know about it, because if I don't know about it or we don't know about it, we can't fix it if we don't know about it. So.
Great point. How about you, Reichert?
Yeah, I would just say, if you're going to do back to the basics, stick with it. I know they had a little problem with the catering at this last one, which took out some of the question and answer period, which I think would have been extremely valuable. I think they were going to have a panel or something, and that would have been good. This one didn't have any breakouts with particular sessions, and I know the breakouts. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, but they seem to be very popular, and we draw a lot of people who come just for some of those breakouts to get detailed information on, like, the software, the old our lodge page and that type of thing, and things from the secretaries need, and because they're leaders of the lodge too. We've had breakouts in the past with the treasurers, and we can get them to come. And of course, a lot of these treasurers are past masters too, and they can add a lot of wisdom, because it's not just what Grand Lodge is putting out. Most of the wisdom comes from the conversations, and the smaller you can get those groups that can talk to one another, I think the more value each individual is going to pull out of it, because then they can pick brains instead of just getting a single point of view that may or may not be relevant or right. This way you can get a bunch of ideas all going at one time, and I think that's where the great value to me was in those breakout sessions. I mean, as long as we don't hurry them, and we can do it deliberately, those I think were good, as well as the big plenum sessions where you have the guest speaker like we did this time, and those are also good, and they're a draw. You get somebody that's really a famous author like Alex Powers there. That's a draw, and it'd be great to have. Your session, by the way, was really good. Your historical session at the beginning.
Thank you so much for that. I totally forgot to even mention the breakout sessions, and those are a huge point, because that's always been a thing. It's like 2 or 3 different breakouts going on at a time at Leadership Academy that I always remember. And my only beef with those, they were great, but they always had 2 different sessions in each that I really wanted to be in. And since, we hadn't really done recording and stuff in the past, that was always like, which one?
That's a diabolical plan. You have to bring more people to cover everything.
It was all thought out. Exactly. We've got a good comment here from the Old Fashioned Masonic podcast again, pardon me, saying lodge officers do have to take ownership in their positions so they can, as we were told, improve ourselves in Masonry. And that's a fantastic point.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, as a lodge officer, you should want to do that, right? Because you're not only trying to improve your lodge, the brothers in the lodge, you're also trying to improve yourself. And if you follow those simple steps, right, you can't fail, right? Because I know that's just the way Masonry is designed, right? It's really a cool deal, right? And, and Rick alluded to it a little bit ago. It's not all about going to the guild or the annual meeting and sitting through the meetings. Sometimes we like the speaker. Sometimes we'd rather not be in there listening to the speakers. But the real value in that is once you step out of that meeting into the hallway and you start having conversation with other brothers, not from your lodge, from other lodges, maybe even from other states. That's where the real value lies, in those things where we gather together. It's just a good example, right? As a Grand Lodge, I'm at the Grand Lodge of Iowa right now, and it's not about the annual meeting and sitting in that meeting. It's about talking with brothers from across Iowa at the banquets, in the hallway, at the table, buying Masonic goods.
Right.
That's the value.
I'm sitting here thinking, and it's interesting because one thing you always hear is when there's any issues, everyone likes to blame Grand Lodge. Oh, you need to do this, need to do that. And whether it be from what I've heard of the Warden School, what I've known of Leadership Academy, and what I just witnessed with the Guild, these are fantastic programs. But us offering that to the individual does not impact or fix our lodges unless these brothers effectively take it back and implement the knowledge and the planning given here as a lodge. As Most Worshipful Reichert was talking about in the beginning, Freemasonry is a lot different than many of these other organizations that we see around, and it's a lot more encompassing. And if we don't actually treat that as the organization it is, it can easily collapse upon itself. So just having one or two guys go and, witness leadership in this manner or that manner, or, some different trainings on this or that, if that doesn't effectively get brought back to the lodge, taught and implemented to the whole there, the lodge doesn't really change any, just the individual. And I think so many of our guys forget that we want you to come and have an amazing time and partake in Grand Lodge activities. But at the end of the day, Grand Lodge is only successful if our individual lodges are successful as well. So you've got to take ownership and really implement these factors back in your home lodges.
Yeah, and conversely, as I've traveled around, I've seen lodges they have some things that they do amazingly well. And plagiarism being the highest form of flattery, or however that saying goes, I mean, that should be another thing we should do, is when the area deputies or district deputies are out wandering around and they see some lodge that's doing something really fantastic, we ought to bottle that up and bring it to the Guild Leadership Academy, Warden School, whatever we call it next time, and let the other guys who have figured out the secret formula bring it and share it with everybody else. Because you mentioned that we're not like other organizations. That's exactly right. You know what we are? We're not an organization. We're an organism. And if you treat it more like that, you realize that there's a lot more going on, and you gotta keep it healthy, and keep all the things going, not just not single faceted. Anyway,
that's a great way to put that, for sure. We've got about 9 minutes here.
That is a great point, and that's probably going to end up as a question on the district deputy's visit now.
Honestly, it should. It's a huge one to pick up on, and I really like the aspect of keeping that level of an eye on the lodges and then bringing that back, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what title you throw on any of us, right? Like, we're just brothers, so we're all humans trying to make this masonry thing work and grow and excel. And, not just because it's Grand Lodge means that's where all the best ideas come from. A lot of times it is just our local brothers figured it out and we can make it work. So that's a really, really great idea. We've got about 8 minutes here until we do our end toast. And one thing I'm thinking about is the future. And not to end this on a bleak note, I'd like to turn it into a positive note, but an aspect of planning, because my fear is, and I think, we're going to see some reality of this. Masonry has a lot of old buildings that are facing a lot of continuously rising taxes and costs and this and that. And over the next decade, 2 decades, we're going to see the face of Masonry shift quite a bit as we continue to, lose buildings to either that of just age or being priced out, et cetera. And that's going to change lodge structures, leadership aspects, whatever, as Masonry kind of confines and shifts around. As we look at that future coming to us, how do you think that will impact local lodge leadership, and how can we think ahead to try to address that?
I've got my own thoughts about it, and that is, and I've heard it mentioned often. It says, first, my philosophy is never fall in love with a building. It will not love you back. And during the great heydays of Kansas Masonry, when we had lots of Masons and they had, they're starting to get affluent, as they built all these great edifices throughout Kansas. And I'm telling you, some of these structures are just amazing. You go to some of these lodge buildings and they just have the most amazing, they're just great architectural pieces. But Masonry isn't the building. Masonry is it's that organism that's inside that building or wherever it may be. And, just about every lodge I've been to has that thing about the lodge that meets over Simpkins store. You've seen that, right? So,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
well, the whole idea is that they started out in borrowed space, and maybe that's where we might end up again. Where we're because it's really not the building; it's the folks that it's masonry. Uh, we're looking for a place to congregate so that we can pass on our lore, through the degree work, pass on those moral lessons through the degree work. But the place is immaterial as long as we can tile it and turn the keys over when we're done. That's okay. Tracy?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Rick says, and that phenomenon is not. Kansas doesn't have a lock on that, right? Here at the Grand Lodge of Iowa, they're talking about the exact same thing that we talked about a couple of years ago. Their Grand Lodge building is needing some repairs. They need to expand it. They've got, unfortunately, nobody planned ahead 40, 50 years ago and created an endowment back then. And so they're basically stuck in the same position we were 3, 4, 5 years ago. And so it's not unique to Kansas, right? And, we see some of our lodges now, they're selling their buildings and, finding other places to meet, more modest places that are more affordable. And look, I mean, you got to make the dollars and cents meet, right? I mean, it's got to come out in the positive, right? You can't come out in the negative. So those are tough and hard choices to make. And yeah. Rick's right. We get attached to buildings and we shouldn't.
Well, it's such a double-edged sword for, guys in our era of masonry, right? Because if you think way back when it was the tavern days, those guys would probably look at masonry today and be like, why the hell do you have these buildings? I mean, they were meeting essentially in secret, right? Top storage room of a tavern, writing chalk on a floor and wiping it all away. And, then came the membership and the money and we could build these beautiful things. And then today we could experience the edge of that where we watch it crumble. And as much as we understand it, it doesn't make it less painful at the same time. So there's definitely that double-edged sword aspect. 100%, masonry has to survive over the buildings by all means, but it still sucks.
Yeah. I'm waiting for one of our lodges to ask us if they sell their building, they can just meet out in the pasture. And our early brothers met in high dales and low dales and what is it? Whatever it is. They met outdoors, right? And,
yeah, we've got a great picture of that from Smith and Lodge, right? When they their original
high hills, low dales.
Yeah.
So it could happen. It could happen again. But I don't know. Masonry's not about the building. It's about the brothers.
Very, very true. Well, brothers, I want to thank you so much. We've had an excellent conversation this evening, kind of exploring the history of before I came into Masonry, what you guys got to see of leadership and where it kind of started as a structured point through what we know of it today, and get a little bit of insight in where that might go in the future here in Kansas. And, of course, with that goal of getting back to our lodges and helping Masonry at its core grow and flourish. As we lean towards the hour this evening, I want to ask, Most Worshipful Bloom, would you offer up a toast for us this evening?
Sure. I should have been ready here.
Dang, Grain secretaries just...
I know it. Brothers, I'm actually going to offer this toast to our host, Alex Powers, who is promoting historical light so that we can study our history so that someday we don't repeat it.
Here, here.
You, Alex.
Historical light. Here, here.
Cheers. Cheers. Thank you so much for that, brother. Thank you, both of you, for joining in this evening, taking a little bit of your time out to spend your evening with us, especially Most Worshipful Bloom while you're on the job traveling. I've got to ask you, we see you in the hot seat every year as Grand Secretary, taking on these big events and just always looking like you're on the edge of an aneurysm. How is it being in another jurisdiction and not being in that hot seat, just getting to, hang back a little bit?
It's flipping great.
You've deserved it.
My counterpart here, I mean, he's kind of looking like I do at the annual meeting. So he'll be up here in my room here in a little bit, and we'll have a libation and cuss and discuss some things. So
cuss and discuss, I like it.
Yes, we will.
Well, thank you guys so much again. I've learned a ton this evening. It's really great to see kind of where that structure of leadership started, where it's came, where it's going in the future. And I know that Kansas Masonry is in good hands. So thank both of you for all that you have done for Kansas Masonry. And please thank your families and friends for letting us borrow you away for just a little bit this evening to cover some of that unknown history. But really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, joining us live this evening. And until next time, keep preserving the history of Freemasonry. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
God bless.